Thank you very much, Dr. Biju, for your generous introduction. Dear teachers of SREENARAYANAGURU Open University, officers, Dr. Parvati, who has come as a guest, friends and fellow men, and students from SM College. Actually, this lecture is intended to provide a framework for understanding interdisciplinarity as a method as well as a thought process. Perhaps most of you from social sciences and literature have come across a plethora of literature on articles on interdisciplinarity. Because interdisciplinarity as a topic is much discussed and debated. Perhaps the nature of a true interdisciplinary methodology, as Dr. Biju remarked about Roland Barthes's definition about interdisciplinarity in an integration of methodologies leading to the creation of a discipline which belongs to none of the disciplines. So that is a Barthian definition. So the Barthian definition, if you look at Roland Barthes, you can consider Barthes as himself as an interdisciplinary text. There are some good articles you have to read on Roland Barthes. The person becomes a body of interdisciplinarity. The best person to analyze not a literature, not an article, but the scholar itself. That is the power of interdisciplinarity. And Barthes has never written anything on interdisciplinarity per se, but Barthes, in the most sophisticated work, the rustle of language, has defined what interdisciplinarity is. Perhaps we can differ with Barthes, because Barthes says that interdisciplinarity is a process and integration of different disciplines, methods and methodologies that would ultimately result in the creation of a discipline which belongs to none of the disciplines from which the methodologies and methods are borrowed. This is a Barthian definition. That means you have to create a new discipline, which is not having any relationship with the disciplines from you have borrowed methods and methodologies. I think you can identify one interdisciplinary segment in that sense is cultural studies, women's studies, as you said, environmental studies. So a lot of schools are there like that. So this is the best way to understand Barthian definition of interdisciplinarity. But there are other scholars like Julie Klein, if you search in the Google about articles and books on interdisciplinarity, perhaps the best author who comes to you with, I think, over a dozen of books on interdisciplinarity. Recently she has written on digital humanities and interdisciplinarity because it is a different terrain. Julie Klein is strikingly different from Roland Barthes. Because Roland Barthes is actually making a statement which is not that much affordable to people who think like us. It's not that much affordable because Barthes himself was a text, as I said, in an interdisciplinary text in that sense. But Julie Thompson, she talks about interdisciplinarity as working a methodology that works on two planes. One is an interdisciplinarity that is very difficult to practice. It's a cognitive kind of interdisciplinarity, higher cognitive kind of interdisciplinarity, where a problem from your area or your theme can be studied only with the help of a fusion of insightful methodological interventions from different disciplines. It's a higher level interdisciplinarity. This is critical interdisciplinarity, as Julie calls it or phrases it out. Critical interdisciplinarity. In history, that happens. The best work to showcase critical interdisciplinarity perhaps is the work in history. I'm not sure about economics and political science, but in history, the work written by Philip Aries on centuries of childhood as you know, where he used psychology, anthropology, politics, economics, all disciplines, even including anthropology, to explain the concept of childhood. When she argued that childhood is the creation of a modern civilization, not ancient or medieval, one may wonder that as if childhood did not exist before the modern, right? Childhood is actually, a concept which we call as Kottayam. If you say, suppose someone say that childhood is a creation of the modern age, you have to define that. Aries defines it with insightful references from politics, sociology, anthropology, economics, psychology. To prove that, even from cultural history and cultural studies was not has not become a block of knowledge in Aries times. But he says that if you want to define childhood, then you have to go through the concepts of modern age which categorize as childhood. Baptism, registers in schools regarding the kids, the toys used by the kids, the satin frock that was actually a gift that was usually a gift presented to a child by the father, all constitute the sensibility of the childhood, where the childhood becomes a body of care, attention, and the secure surveillance of the parents. So disciplines converge there to define a commonsensical term like childhood. The childhood, as far as we understand childhood, we have no problem with childhood because we have not put our thought on an imaginative plane that worked with Philip Aries in centuries of childhood. So this is a kind of interdisciplinarity which is a higher sensible, higher cognitive kind of interdisciplinarity which Julie Thompson calls as critical interdisciplinarity. Second is an instrumental interdisciplinarity, where you can definitely do an interdisciplinary study in management and business studies, taking inputs from different disciplines very easily because it's kind of statistical reasoning. You can do that very well. That's easy. Instrumental interdisciplinarity. So, while I am quoting from both from Roland Barthes from his Russell of Language and Julie Thompson from her writings on interdisciplinarity right from 1999 up to 2024, even now she has written, she is writing on interdisciplinarity, she is continuing with that. So both persons begin an interdisciplinary text where you find that as a man, as a human being, Roland Barthes' interdisciplinarity stands apart. Because interdisciplinarity is a methodology which belongs to none of the disciplines from which you have borrowed any method or methodology, per se, theory itself. This is actually an introductory remark about, interdisciplinarity. And I would like to tell you that, this lecture is actually a very complicated and complex lecture because interdisciplinarity is a complicated process. So, even I may make you confused in certain direction. If I succeed in making you confused, that means I have succeeded in my lecture. So let me start with one of the greatest physicists of the 20th century, who was part of the Manhattan Project, along with Oppenheimer, to a certain extent Einstein even. His name is Richard Feynman. I think you have given someone of you have gone through Richard Feynman's lectures in the internet. So Richard Feynman, actually he was talking on any subject with that much of what you call a communicative language which the physicists never have, because their communication is through equations, but Richard Feynman's communication is through what a kind of an artistic expression of the science. Very difficult kind. And Richard Feynman, he gives us an allegory, something like an allegory, If it is something like an allegory of Plato's cave in the Republic, something like that, Richard Feynman puts a very simple thing before us. A lady falls on an icy surface. On an ice, a lady fell down. Immediately knowledge emerges there. Different perspectives emerges there. One perspective, usually the perspective is that, anybody standing on the icy surface should be definitely cautious and careful, and the lady was not careful, she was not cautious, so that she fell down. This is an easiest interpretation of that event. This event can be considered metaphorically as an event which would trigger the imagination of the scientist as well as the social scientist. Why I am saying this? Definitely you should have a departure in your mindset, conventional mindset, a commonsensical mindset towards reaching cross-disciplinarity or pluridisciplinarity or multidisciplinarity, and towards the end, the climax, as if in a Hollywood cinema, that is interdisciplinary. Take it easy. Can you follow me? No, because we are 4 faculty members from various schools, I have no worries about that, because you have a very good understanding of the interdisciplinary from your own areas. So Feynman says that this fall is an event. But think about the event scientifically. Why did the lady stumbled upon or fell on the icy substance? Because he says the lady, for example, she is having 60 kilogram weight. So that weight is exerted as pressure on the ice. So what happens is that, between the lady's foot and the ice, there emerges a liquid space that is slippery, and she fell. So this is a scientific rationale behind the lady's fall. Scientific rationale. So this scientific rationale is not conceived by people. People say that she fell down because of various reasons. She was absent-minded. She was looking at somebody. She was thinking about her husband. That's why she fell down on the ice. I take a caveat from you for not being, I'm not talking a precise matter in that sense, just narrating something that is in line with Richard Feynman's argument. Right. So Feynman says that, what is this? The transformation has to happen there. In looking at a simple commonsensical event, it should trigger the mind of the researcher, so that a new knowledge is created based on scientific rationality. I am putting Richard Feynman here and let him station here like that. I am going to some other areas, and we will definitely close this lecture with another physicist, Max Planck. Okay. So what is my understanding about interdisciplinarity? Rather than going to Roland Barthes or Julie Thomson or a host of a galaxy of scholars who have written volumes and volumes on interdisciplinarity, what is my understanding about interdisciplinarity? Basically, interdisciplinarity is a bend of mind. The bend of mind that happens in the mindset of the scholar. How are you open to other disciplines? Because discipline, as we understand, is another discipline also. Tony Beck, in his academic tribes, talks about a new tribe, the academic tribe. The academic tribe are most conventionally placed and located. You are sitting in different rooms, sitting in different cubicles. Like Professor Yashpal about in 2017 talked about the cubicalization of disciplines, one cubicle, another department, And even schools are there, they talk a kind of integration, but never they submit to other disciplines, because when you submit to other disciplines, then your autonomy is lost. So interdisciplinarity is something that warrants us to surrender the autonomy of the discipline. It's a bent of mind. But this surrender will not happen automatically. This surrender is encapsulated in the mind of the person who is following the discipline like a tribe. Why Tony Becker calls it as a tribe is for the reason that you get conventionally situated and located inside the discipline, and the disciplines define you. See, as a historian, in what way I think, and as a sociologist, how will you think? As a historian, I believe in archival methodology, textual criticism. A sociologist is coming up with a number of questions, a questionnaire, 100 questions to come out with an answer. Perhaps the one-on-one question will be the question that is most warranting there, but they have to fix that statistical analysis within the 100 questions. So that is the methodology. The economists, they do with charts, they do with indexes, they do with a lot of statistics and tables and figures. So every discipline in that sense, make you a slave inside that discipline. Unknowing, we are not knowing that we are a slave inside the discipline. This can be considered as a methodological enslavement. Because we inherit a lot of things from the discipline. Like people inherit from the caste. Regimented tribes, we inherit something from the discipline. And we go in that manner when the discipline is warranting you, you go like this. This is your methodology. That is why, when students come up with some of the fascinating topics, many of the teachers in many universities and colleges in Kerala, I have seen that, they will say that, this is not historical, this is not sociological, this does not belong to literature. When I was doing, some studies on film history, an erudite historian posted this question to me, an erudite historian. I respect him, I admire him, but he asked this question, Sebastian, films are, result of imagination. So why do you want to study this kind of imagination of certain script writers or directors or other filmmakers, I have no answer to him. Because, we were debating on, whether Kerala Varma Padashiraja is a historical film or not. The major issue with most of the conventionally situated inherited historians, casteist historians, in the sense that history is a caste, which will never, trust anything other than a written document, a textualized document, archival document. Padashiraja was not like Mammootty. That was a major issue. Then I asked him, sir, we have not seen Padashiraja. Padashiraja is seen with a big belly in some of the textbooks, നല്ല കൊടുവയുള്ള ഒരാളായിട്ട് കണ്ടിട്ടുണ്ട്. ഒരു തിരുമേനിയുടെ ദേഹം. But Padashiraja's, image or personality is represented only in one British document written by a deputy collector, only one document where it is stated that he used to wear a red cat with a very light mustache and then very short fellow wearing dhoti, with no ornaments. Finally says that he looked like a monkey. All the Indians looked like a monkey for the Europeans. Naturally, it's quite natural. So the professor was asking me, you see, this is actually a distortion of history. Then I asked him, sir, what about the distortion happening in these times? Other distortions are also happening. You are not saying anything about that, but this is distortion. Mammootty should not be there, or some other actor should be there. So interdisciplinary thought process engaging with a discipline's inherited orthodox doxa, Pierre Bourdieu. Some of you might have read the Pierre Bourdieu's, theory of knowledge, where he talks about the doxa. Doxa means orthodoxy element in a discipline. He was talking about education, about culture, about habits and all. I am leaving all those things and says that it's a doxa of the discipline. Discipline restricts you to think. It restricts you. It's structuring to think. So when it structures you to think in a positivist methodology, because positivism is actually a very acclaimed and established knowledge system, a perspective, we have no disagreement with that. But the thing is that there are things outside positivism. There are things outside scientism. There are things outside text. There are things outside spoken words with images. You can look at my image and think in different ways. How many people look at my image and think that this is a person? What are you thinking about me in your mind? I cannot decipher that, right? Lot of perspectives are there. Perhaps there is a sociological perspective, there is a feminist perspective, perhaps there is an academic perspective, things like that. So even an image is a text in that sense. So how will you understand the image is the question in film history. So that is why I said that we have to get rid of the conventional modalities and structured thinking of the discipline through a critiquing capacity to critique a momentary event, something like a spasmodic event. As Biju said, spasmodic event looking at the ocean or the Mediterranean, the spasmodic event looking at Arabian Sea, saying that Arabian Sea determined the history of Kerala. No temples, no paddy fields, no, a totally different historiography emerges, but you have to prove in what way Arabian Sea is determining the history of Kerala. Only through an integration of history, geography, even psychology, sociology, economy, cartography, geography. That was Fernando. I am sorry to say about Fernando. If I talk about Fernando, I may go without any control. So I am stopping Fernando's quote here. So interdisciplinarity in that sense is is a rainforest. A rainforest, A rainforest is very rich in organisms, isn't it? Diverse organisms. I think some of you might have examined, read about the difference between a salad bowl and a rainforest. A salad bowl, what is a salad bowl? There are different varieties of vegetables inside that, all mixed, right? But all vegetables are there like that. Separate identity, that's a salad bowl. People used to say that salad bowl is actually a great example for understanding complexities and interdisciplinarity, but interdisciplinarity is a forest, a rainforest. A rainforest in the sense that, because inside the forest, if you consider the forest, it's a metaphor, if you consider the forest as a discipline, Roland Barthes' term, rustle is meaningful there. R-U-S-T-L-E, rustle. Rustle means in Malayalam it is marmaram. Marmaram. Very difficult to understand that rustle of the discipline. The diverse methodology that is calling your attention, but you are not looking at it. Your discipline itself is calling you with a diverse, multifaceted, multi-perspectival outlook, but you are not looking at that because you are not proficient enough to understand that rustle. Marmaram. Rainforest marmaram. മനസ്സിലാക്കാൻ നമുക്ക് കഴിവില്ലാതെ പോകുന്നത് നമ്മുടെ മെത്തഡോളജിക്കൽ ഇഷ്യൂ ആണ്, ഡിസിപ്ലിൻ്റെ പ്രശ്നമല്ല. I hope. If you have any difference of opinion, definitely you can argue with me, because this is not the end of interdisciplinarity. It continues. Even today, interdisciplinarity is continuing a very different terrain. Like how humanity is subject, integrate different kinds of subjects together with that. When mathematics itself is showing signs of withering away, Earlier, mathematics used to be a strict discipline subject. Mathematics teachers also looked different. Hair on the ear and, a very furious look and coming always with a stick, Even now, I have that much of a very horrifying experience of mathematics. Because, whenever the mathematics teacher comes and look at you, you will definitely look down because, any question to you, you cannot answer. So, but the mathematics is also, that particular strict mathematician is also changing these days. About 30-20 years before, mathematicians, get adapted to a new mathematical science called, I think people may know that, you are already in the know of that, fuzzy mathematics. Fuzzy mathematics means, that can be up F-U-S-Z-Z-Y. Are there any mathematicians inside this classroom? No questions, please. Okay, on mathematics, only on fuzzy mathematics integration. So fuzzy mathematics is actually a term which enjoys, something like a subjective pluralism of quantum mechanics of mass Planck. Because when you say that energy is in a linear form, it was the first radical shift from that particular classical physicist that, energy is in discrete packets. It is not 1 to 100, but there are ruptures. So I used to think that, Max Planck had very much what in common was Max Planck's, idea of discrete packeted or quantas of energy, and that is definitely aligned with Foucault's ruptures in that sense. But Max Planck was a very positivist modern science. He was following a classical physicist methodology, but ultimately what proved that, this quantum theory is very well applied in social sciences these days to understand subjectivities. So, my argument is that, if you want to understand, if you want to get hold of that Russell or cull out that Russell, you have to have a trained mind of methodology of your own discipline. Understanding and grip on your own discipline is the first step towards multidisciplinarity, to cross-disciplinarity, to pluridisciplinarity, to interdisciplinarity, and finally, the greatest of all the disciplinary engagement, that is called the transdisciplinarity. Trans. That is not academic sometimes, that is social. Transdisciplinarity is the most difficult kind of interdisciplinarity because it goes beyond the academia. It goes beyond the autonomy of the academia and goes to the society and come back sometimes. And sometimes it becomes a different kind of discipline in the society itself. So I will explain about that. So my argument is that the salad pot or the bowl is a reductionist approach. Whereas the forest is something like an expanded terrain of different methodologies where you can sense a scope for methodological pluralism. So a shift from methodological individualism, isolated methodological approach to methodological pluralism is actually the turning point, the first turning point in interdisciplinarity. That is why I said that, interdisciplinarity is something like a forest with all its holistic complexity. Holistic complexity. India is not a salad bowl. We should never permit India to become a salad bowl because, all the salad, in the salad bowl, different vegetables, coexist like one, even though they are different, but it is a rainforest. I hope you definitely agree with me, at least in that respect. So the forest has a holistic complexity. It's symbolizing totality of knowledge, a complex and interdependent ecosystem. Interdisciplinarity is, in that sense, is a different ecological academic architecture in that sense. A different ecological academic architecture is not simply an academic architecture, it's a holistic ecological academic architecture, as I understand the term, as I have experienced with some of methodological innovations, which I experimented in history in connection with or in sync with sociology, political science, anthropology, memory studies, things like that. Per se, this is not a class on interdisciplinarity in history because interdisciplinarity is not historical. Everywhere you can apply interdisciplinarity. But my stress on that is definitely because of my subjectivity towards the discipline. That is why I said that you have inherited the autonomy of a discipline which will definitely stand in as a block even in delivering a lecture on interdisciplinarity. So I think you can understand my prejudice in that sense. I am submitting that before you, and I celebrate that subjectivity in some terms because I never consider the objectivity as a true form of representation. Can you say that any objective methodology which enjoys a uniformity like a salad bowl is truthful to any academia? No, there is nothing like that. The uniformitization of methodologies inside a strictly single discipline will never lead you to an elaborated, emancipated thinking on intellectual horizon of knowledge transmission to everybody. Everybody concerned. So many of the theses produced in Kerala University or Gandhi University are affixed with the label of RIP and taking rest in libraries, rest in peace, requiescat in peace. If you follow the Latin word RIP. Why it happens like that? There are some good theses, but that is not coming into the society because of fear, maybe, of the researcher that, once it is exposed, his intellectual domain will be questioned. Identity and integrity will be questioned. So interdisciplinarity in that sense, it expels the fear of the researcher. That is my point. It expels the fear of the researcher getting connected to different disciplines, different methodologies and methods. By the way, I just want to make a clarification about words. I usually make that Sri and Ashwini very well know that, what is method and what is methodology. Method is not methodology. Method and methodology are two different things. You all know that. But what I understand, I will definitely explain it before you. Method is actually an engagement with a text or an artifact or a field survey, something like that. A field survey, an oral history interview, a statistical tool, anything can be a method. But the integration of these methods through a theoretical lens, through a theoretical orientation, which makes the logical connectedness of the thesis is methodology. It is more philosophical. So even in the case that you have an empirical grip on the data, your empirical grip on the data is just an empirical grip on the data. If you cannot integrate the data and cull out a theory, an argument, as we call these days, an argument which is not an established theory in the thesis. That will definitely kindle your mind towards an interdisciplinarity. The bend of the mind is there. That is why we call, academicians as people with different approaches towards the subject. There are new approaches. I don't consider the word attitude, but approach. What is your approach towards your discipline? Is it disciplinary? Is it multidisciplinary? Is it pluridisciplinary? Or is it transdisciplinary? First, you should understand that. Never say that I belong to an interdisciplinary clan in the first instance, because you are never an interdisciplinary clan unless and until you understand the discipline strategies and methods. The first one is multidisciplinarity. The NEP says that the India is going to transform because there is a multidisciplinarity. What is multidisciplinarity? Multidisciplinarity is disciplinarity. The people who have coined the term multidisciplinarity and projected it to the NEP, they have no idea about the disciplinarity because they think that multi means lot of disciplines are there. Like in an avial, fire, Valdarika, Kumbanga, Kimbalanga, interdisciplinarity. Interdisciplinarity is not that. Multidisciplinarity is not interdisciplinarity. Multidisciplinarity ultimately becomes discipline. What is the definition of multidisciplinarity? Disciplines are placed side by side, each addressing a problem from its own perspective, but without substantial integration. There is no integration there. Finally, that methodology comes back to the discipline only. If I am using political science, economics, anthropology and literature, for example, structural linguistics, semiotics or whatever be the theory, I will ultimately come to my discipline, history. And your landing space is your discipline. Then how can that be a highly complex integrated form of disciplinarity? It is just disciplinarity. So multidisciplinarity is sometimes you consider it as disciplinarity itself. Multidisciplinarity is a great humanitarian enlightened policeman, not like the policeman that you usually see. It is an enlightened policeman. It will invite you sometimes to a different discipline, safeguard you, make your pathway to the discipline very safe and secure, but ultimately take you back to the discipline and discipline you. It's a conventional inheritance, disciplinarity, multidisciplinarity. An example for students, from Punalur SN College. What is multidisciplinarity? Because I think students have studied in during the first semester of degree, a paper, something like introducing history or first paper. I forgot the name of the course name. An environmental issue studied separately by historians. ഒരു പാരിസ്ഥിതിക പ്രശ്നം വളരെ വ്യത്യസ്തമായിട്ട് ചരിത്രകാരന്മാർ പഠിക്കുന്നു, സാമ്പത്തിക ശാസ്ത്രജ്ഞന്മാർ പഠിക്കുന്നു, സോഷ്യോളജിസ്റ്റുകൾ പഠിക്കുന്നു. And their own findings they place. But they have some integration, not substantial integration with other disciplines. They will never address a cognitively far advanced kind of research problem. It's a simple research problem. That is why it is called multidisciplinarity. Disciplines are juxtaposed each other. in something like, a coexistence, sometimes an additive impact on disciplines. This is multidisciplinarity. And the second one is cross-disciplinarity. Sorry. The disciplinary fatigue. So H2 is essential for a historian. And cross-disciplinarity is simply that you can borrow any methodology or methodological insight from another discipline's theories or methods from another, often applying them within its own framework. That is pluridisciplinary. Transcending your discipline, but again coming back to your discipline. For example, a historian. As a historian, I am in the know of a psychoanalytical theory used in memory studies. Psychoanalytic theory used in memory studies or in oral history. It's simply pluridisciplinarity. And the nature of pluridisciplinarity is borrowing. You are borrowing a methodology and you are translating that methodology. Translating means not paribhasha, but you are applying that methodology into your discipline. It's pluridisciplinarity. The best example for historian, as I understand, is using the psychoanalytic theory in memory studies or in oral history. Then the next is interdisciplinary method. Interdisciplinary method, I have defined in the first instance of this lecture as, in a strict sense, it is substantial, genuine integration of methods, theories, and perspectives to create a common analytical framework. There lies the definitional, polarization between Julie Klein, Julie Thompson, and Roland Barthes. For example, if you look at my own specialization of film history, it weaves archival research. Sometimes, we take from Zojulian semiotics. There are literature teachers here inside. Literature. Yeah. I can use a film history that weaves archival research with semiotics or Zojulian semiotics. Sometimes from cultural anthropology, I can use. I can even use political economy to frame out an issue. The nature is integration, synthesis. A true dialogue happens there, and then the problem becomes somebody's problem, not belonging to history. It can be considered as a branch of history, but never it belongs to the conventional, routinized methodological practices engaged by the historians. I hope you understand. So that is a truly very difficult issue. You can do that, but the thing is that you should have a bent of mind for that. Finally comes the transdisciplinary method. The transdisciplinary, as the word indicates, it moves beyond the disciplinary boundaries. It moves beyond the disciplinary boundaries. It produces new frameworks that cannot be located within a single field. It often engages with real life world problems. When I was reading transdisciplinary, I had an engagement with a famous historian, and I asked him, sir, in what way history can be made useful for the society? So I sometimes in many of my lectures, I use the term therapeutics of history. There is a therapeutics for history. History is therapeutic. It therapeutically engages with the society. It goes to the roots of the issues. It finds out that even at every root, you will find that a lack of sapienship or lack of humanness is the problem for all issues in the society. Ultimately, we come to know about that. You can dissect world wars. You can dissect crises, political crises, or rebellions, or revolution, whatever we like that. Ultimately, you come to know that the human mind was, or the human was neglected by many political systems and social systems. When history engages with that, with certain methods, history becomes transdisciplinary. Transdisciplinary is a highly utility-oriented kind of disciplinary practice. It becomes the societies. I have checked this. I have verified this, through guiding many colleges setting up oral history archives in Kochi, in Trivandrum, and in one of the finest museums of Kerala Museum in Edapalli. They have organized, they have set up, oral history archives. People, anybody can go there, give you a version of your past or region's past, and that becomes part of history. So all the histories that were neglected is weaved together with the political, social, cultural, environmental, and social and women's history of any region. Every individual is important there. So what is this transdisciplinary engagement is that whatever be the memory of a person is located in a collective consciousness or a social memory. Maurice Halbach has, defined terms like social memory and collective memory and autobiographical memory. Because every autobiographical memory is located in a social memory or collective memory. You cannot have a memory of your own because your memory is shaped by the society. So when you come to know that your memory is shaped by the society, the feelings of integration with the society becomes very crucial, and that you will respect the person sitting next to you despite the fact that he belongs to a different caste or community or region. Ultimately, like Salman once said, progressive humanization should be the aim of higher education. Progressive humanization. So transdisciplinary in that sense, I consider as a disciplinary practice which will definitely equip you with a therapeutical understanding of history, progressive humanization. Because whenever your thesis is linked with the society, when that thesis is linked and integrated with the society, it becomes public. You got the point. So the publication of history, institutionalization of history of people whose marginalized lives are, narrated very forcefully by themselves. Every individual is becoming an archive in that sense. My mother was an archive. I used to have different sessions with her before her death, about 2-3 years, on different sessions I had engagement with my mother. Only then I understood that, the strength of the positive effect of transdisciplinarity, because I was living with my mother for about, when I happened to start this interview, I was about 45. Then that means 45 years of relationship with my mother was there. Then I started talking to her. Then I started interviewing her. She started narrating her life story to me. That was actually a breakthrough for me in understanding public history. Not my mother's history, but public history. She was a cancer patient. I came to understand the sufferings and issues she faced. As a school teacher, in those times, they had no great salary, in the initial times, I was studying in 9th standard. All that memories came as a whole. And then, I searched for records, original records from my mother. She had kept all the bundles of her treatment records of cancer, for example, hot skin disease. They are very safe with her. She was a good museum keeper in that sense. Her subject was chemistry. My father's subject was history. And my daughter also studied history. We used to say that totally we are a mystery because an integration of chemistry and history. But my mother was more historical than we, because she used to say when they, document all these, medical records in Paka stage. I went through the records one by one. Actually, this was an engagement which was actually emotively, heuristically engagement. I was emotively attached to my mother, and I was going through the records and I couldn't find my mother. The gaze of the medical practitioner is there, the oncologist is there. My mother is a body, it is marked in different, segments. My mother's, the radiation plan and everything is there. The diagnosis is there. Ultimately, the treatment reports finally narrates us a story. But I couldn't understand what is the emotion of my mother. I went to her, talked to her, I understood her. Then what happened? About more than 2 years, I had shared this thing with Dr. Biju many times, even with some of the variety historians. Just to impress upon them the importance of oral history, not just inscriptions and so for that, what was the outcome of that? The outcome, actually, that was a stunning outcome, because I used to love my mother more. I used to spend more time with my mother. Earlier, when never meet, it is usually that thing is happening in our homes, I used to sit with her, I used to talk to her. That means I understood my mother as an entity, as an archive. Something like the great quote that, there is an archive next to doorstep, something like that. But see, So my mother's memory, it is an autobiographical memory, but that is in the collective memory. She talks about, a gift given to her by her father when she was 7 or 8 years old, a satin frock. Usually that was a great gift for a doctor, usually given by parents. The satin frock memory is very much with her. Then in my interview with many of the aunties and older ladies, on many occasions I have come to the cross reference. I used to cross references. Many people said that in my younger times, my father wrote the satin frock. So satin frock is becoming a part of the common memory. That means the social memory. So my mother's memory about the satin frock is placed in the social memory. So that becomes a public memory. At that time, I was reading a book which was actually written by one of the fascinating ones. All the social scientists should read that. It is written by Paul Thompson's A Voice of the Past. There is a voice for the past. Actually, have you read that? Voice of the Past. You have seen that book. Yeah, Voice of the Past. That means we have seen the texts of the past. But what is the voice of the past? Only to understand the polyphonic, diverse rainforest complexities of public history. Where will you find it in the archives? Where will you find it in the labs? Where will you find it in stereotypical kind of fieldworks? You will never understand that because you consider the person as an object of inquiry. You are not finding time to get into an immersive relationship with the person. Immersive relationship with the person, with the community, and ultimately the sociology or economics or politics or history became a knowledge institutionalized for the public. That is the end result of transdisciplinarity. Very, very serious engagement, very difficult engagement. Perhaps that will definitely raise the value of your subject, be it Malayalam or English or history or physics, whatever be the subject, there lies the true value that I consider transdisciplinary study as therapeutic. Can we have a rest for 5 minutes? Not for me, but for you. Vocal cord, actually. Then comes, an interdisciplinarity which is not usually talked about. We talk about hybrid cars these days, hybridity. Hybridity is a common term. So there should be a methodological hybridization in interdisciplinarity, a deliberate mixing of tools and techniques. For example, as far as I understand, ethnography, archival study, photography, and quantitative modeling. These days, many of the social scientists, linguists are cooperating with media people to narrate and craft out stories of the past, stories of the present, stories of the marginalized sections. Because yesterday, actually while we were deliberating on some arguments, I aired a term, which, the difference between realistic and realistic. We have a realistic contemporary time here. We believe in reals, realistic and what is real. Whether the reals are more real than the reality, then the reality is a question. Reality is to be questioned. Where that's why a methodological hybridization is very important. Anybody can, usually in the commonsensical parlance, we can say that, oh, that is just a real, but that real is more important than the real. Because especially when you adapt itself to a totally different kind of, society, civilizational crisis, like there are sociology teachers here. Sociology, yeah, because like Sigmund Bauman's theory of liquid modernity. My mentees are very experts in liquid modernity, all forms of liquid, because we have no fixed categorization of methodology. Liquid modernity is actually a concept, developed by one of the greatest fascinating sociologists, Polish sociologist, Sigmund Bauman, where he says that, when you use this hybridization of methodology, when methodological invocations are getting integrated, like a hybrid engine, what produces is a totally different conceptualization of our own times, the modern times. That is why Bauman uses this term of liquid modernity. Liquid modernity is eclectic. Liquid modernity is liquid, like liquid. If you pour out this liquid on the table, it may move in different directions. The best example to understand liquid modernity is the sensibility of the audience, especially, I differ with Biju and Ashwati, with regard to the reviews they made about Loka, the film, liquid modern times, because it all depends upon the generational aspirations, which I consider as the spectatorial imagination. There is a spectatorial imagination. The generational divide, the generational difference leads to a different spectatorial imagination, because Loga looks at you at the same time you are seeing Loga, because that intermediate kind of transactional modality is happening when you look at the cinema. So only if you understand the hybridization of theories, you will be able to understand a text like popular cinema, like Loga. I have my own understanding about Loga. Perhaps people may differ with that. So I understand that spectatorial imagination depends on a kind of liquid modern conditioning, because the values which you uphold, understand as great values, become secondary values. And the values which the new generation come up with, a kind of values. For example, if you try to understand students, why do students use ChatGPT? And teachers say that students don't use ChatGPT because the ChatGPT is a favorite domain of the teachers. They can do everything with ChatGPT. All the all the misspellings and also factual incorrections are repeated by students also. I have come to know about several instances from many higher education institutions. But I understand that ChatGPT, if you consider ChatGPT as a product of new generation, a liquid modern generation, what is wrong in following ChatGPT? What is wrong? Because earlier you used to have copy editors. Now even the press, when I send articles to many of the presses and even Malayalam weeklies, they say that no, I used to inquire, how do you copy edit it? What is the meaning of copy editing? No, that is done by technology in that sense. Many in that sense. It has become a new normal in that sense. Because new normal is a phrase that came to us during 2020. New normal, new normal is not abnormal. Many people think that new normal is abnormal. So the thinking that new normal is abnormal is the absurdity of the conventionist mindset of the person who says that this new normal is abnormal. He is abnormal in that sense. Something like a definitional status of identification which Papu uses in a film. I forgot the name of the film. Papu uses in the film. It's a kind of such a complex situation that we are facing. We are not understanding who we are in such a situation. That is what I implicate in liquid modernity. When I say that I am SebastianJoseph, when suppose someone says that I am Kottayam, when you add a honorific like Dr. Kottayam, immediately the image changes. So what was the trust on Kottayam? Up to that time is a serious engagement. For the term which carries a honorific like doctor or something like a lawyer or engineer, something like that, leaves all the void and immediately that person is going up in the social hierarchy, right? And many people are there with this honorific with no idea about the particular honorific itself. What is a doctor? How did he become a doctor? Things like that. Why? Because the methodological integration is not happening in their mind. They are not understanding the present times. So interdisciplinarity, that is methodological hybridization, is very important for understanding the present also. Any subject has got a present, പണ്ട് പഠിക്കുന്ന കാലത്ത് അധ്യാപകർ പറയുമായിരുന്നു, നമ്മൾ ചരിത്രമാണ് പഠിക്കുന്നത്, അത് കഴിഞ്ഞ കാലഘട്ടത്തെ കുറിച്ച് ഉള്ളതാണ്, നിങ്ങൾ ഇപ്പോൾ ഒന്നും ചിന്തിക്കരുത്, ഇന്നത്തെ ഒന്നും ചിന്തിക്കരുത്. പിന്നെ കുറെ കാലം കഴിഞ്ഞപ്പോഴാണ് ഞാൻ മനസ്സിലായത് എന്തൊക്കെ പൊട്ടത്തരമാണ് അത് പറഞ്ഞിട്ട്. അന്ന് നമ്മളങ്ങനെ ചിന്തിച്ച് നല്ല റാങ്കിങ് മേടിച്ചു. അപ്പൊ നമ്മുടെ റാങ്കിന്റെ വില എന്താണ്? See, this is the way in which we should think. We should definitely have a regressive kind of analysis of our own personality. A regressive, not only progressive in that sense. See, we always go in that progressive. That's why you quoted from the quantum, discrete, and the fuzzy mathematics, which deals with the emotional analysis of violence in India, in ancient India, in medieval India, in modern India. There's so much studies happening in the world. We are not doing that thanks to the non-hybrid and conventional and positivist course curriculum of our universities. When we claim that we are very, very modern, we are not even modern in that sense. Then how can you talk about postmodern and liquid modern? Right? And the next important engagement, it is not just methodological. this is, I think, as far as I understand, this is the most important aspect in internalizing interdisciplinarity. Internalizing interdisciplinarity. കാരണം ഞാൻ ഈ ആന്തരികവൽക്കരണം എന്ന വാക്ക് പറഞ്ഞതിന് പ്രത്യേക കാരണമുണ്ട്. കാര്യം എന്താണെന്ന് വെച്ച് കഴിഞ്ഞാൽ ഞാനൊരു പ്രസന്റേഷൻ KCHR കഴിഞ്ഞ വർഷങ്ങൾക്ക് മുമ്പ് KN മെഡിക്കൽ സാർ ഇരിക്കുന്നുണ്ട്. KN മെഡിക്കൽ സാറിന്റെ മുമ്പിലാണ് ഈ പ്രസന്റേഷൻ നടത്തുന്നത്. അത് കഴിഞ്ഞ് KN മെഡിക്കൽ സാറിനോട് ഞാൻ ചോദിച്ചു, സാർ എനിക്കിതിലേക്ക് ഒരു തിയറി അങ്ങോട്ട് വെക്കാൻ പറ്റുന്നില്ല. സാറിനെ നോക്കി വളരെ ഇന്നസെന്റ് ആയിട്ട് വാട്ട് എ ഫൂൾ ഹി ഈസ് പുള്ളി മനസ്സിലാക്കുന്നുണ്ട്. എന്നിട്ട് പറഞ്ഞു, സെബാസ്റ്റ്യൻ തിയറി വരേണ്ടത് ആന്തരികമായിട്ടാണ്, അത് ഇന്റർണലൈസ് ചെയ്ത് വരണം, അത് തന്നെ വന്നോളൂ, അതിങ്ങനെ തന്നെ വന്നോളൂ, തിയറിക്ക് വേണ്ടി നീ ബലം പിടിക്കണ്ട. അപ്പൊ നമ്മൾ ഒരു ബലം പിടിച്ചിട്ട് ഒരു കാര്യമില്ല, എനിക്ക് ഇന്ന തിയറി വേണം, ബലം പിടിച്ചിട്ട് കാര്യം. പലരും പറയാറുണ്ട്, സാർ ആ തിയറി ഇവിടെ ആപ്ലിക്കബിൾ ആവുന്നില്ല, അതിന് എങ്ങനെ നമുക്ക് ഇതിനകത്ത് ആപ്ലിക്കബിൾ ആക്കാൻ പറ്റൂല. See, they are not knowing about the problem that they are investigating. They have no idea about the research problem. That is why, once a teacher came to me, teacher or sir, whatever you think about that, at UC college, while I just joined the college and for some consultation regarding research, and then I said, what is your problem? She immediately glared at me, looked at me like this, what I meant, this fellow asking about my problem. No understanding about research problem in that sense. And then I asked, what is the research problem? Even then clarity is not there. Then I asked, what is the theme of your research? Oh, okay. I have this theme. So it was something like a world history theme, everything under one frame. I said, you cannot do history like that. So these are little things, but great things. Epistemic interdisciplinarity is not just methodological. This is in the mature phase of interdisciplinarity you happen to have an epistemic interdisciplinarity. It is not just methodological, but, please note this point, but a questioning of the ways of knowing in each discipline. A questioning of the ways of knowing in each discipline. Have you engaged with that? നമ്മുടെ ഡിസിപ്ലിൻ എങ്ങനെയാണ് നമ്മൾ ഇത് അറിയുന്നത് എന്ന് നമ്മൾ മനസ്സിലാക്കുന്നത്. അതുകൊണ്ടായിരിക്കും ഞാൻ ചിലപ്പോൾ പപ്പുവിൻ്റെ ഒരു കമന്റ് ഞാൻ പറയുന്നത്, ഈ ഡിസിപ്ലിൻ ഞാൻ എന്താണ് ഞാനിത് ചെയ്യുന്നത്, എന്തുകൊണ്ട് ഞാനിത് ചെയ്യുന്നു എന്ന് ഞാൻ അറിയുന്നു. So that is epistemic interdisciplinarity. Best example is feminist epistemologies, interrogating both historical method and sociological theory to reveal gendered blind spots. Gendered blind spots. Not that point. It's not blind or you, but gendered blind spots. So that epistemological engagement is totally reflexive. It just not contains your methodology to a particular cubicle, but it is reflexive. In Malayalam, it is പ്രതിഫലനാത്മകമായി, അല്ലേ? പ്രതിഫലനം ഉണ്ടെന്നാണ് പറയുന്നത്. അത് അടിച്ചാൽ തിരിച്ചു പോകുന്നു, അവിടെ അടിച്ച് പതിച്ചിരിക്കില്ല, അത് അങ്ങോട്ട് പ്രതിഫലിക്കും. So it's a lightning dissemination happening. That is epistemic interdisciplinarity. It is reflexive, critical, and philosophical. So I conclude my argument that it is not the pot or the salad bowl, but it is the rainforest. Very complex, highly inextricably interrelated methods and methodologies. You have to cull out such methods and methodologies. Not the methodology will come in a straightforward jacketed form, something like a mechanical thing, but you have to cull out the methodology from within, from the core of the discipline. You have to make a passionate attachment with your discipline. I used to tell my mentees that you should go for a tea with your discipline. You should sleep with your discipline. You should walk with your discipline. Only for such people, the discipline will love you. Otherwise, discipline is an island, you are at the island. So this integration happens when you go out to other disciplines. It's a democratic way of epistemological engagement with different disciplines. Now, for your understanding, so many people have asked me this question in many academic so-called refresher courses, or non-refresher courses we used to attend in the universities, all the Bakada Santoshangal and everything like that. Many people ask this question, how do you cultivate the quality of interdisciplinarity? How can you attain that? So I have a formula for that. Perhaps you can differ with me. For which, I understand that interdisciplinarity starts with problematization of the research. The research problem. Every interdisciplinarity methodology is problem-centric. So when you formulate certain research questions that cannot be answered adequately by one discipline alone, for example, a question like, as far as I am concerned, how do cinematic representations of famine reshape public memory of colonial policies? Totally different thing, It's not a colonial document that you are talking about, you are talking about the cinematic representations of famine and how it will reflect upon the colonial records that you have studied so far. A meta-historical approach. Historians or sociologists are very much sure about that approach, as it was argued by Hayden White in meta-history. He uses the term, let's see, emplotment, because all events and processes are frozen in history. Okay, right? Frozen. Freezed. Like in a refrigerator. All the past events are freezed as in a refrigerator. You have to energize them. You have to give energy to them. When you give energy to them, it is splitting up or coming up as different stories. When it becomes stories, it is defrosted. Right? So the dead talks to you a different kind of story. See, look at what a fantastic, methodology Hayden White has posted in meta-history, in employment. This is a kind of, a problem of symbolic representations which was not so far addressed by historians, right? It's the most complex cognitive, higher cognitive kind of engagement. So many cogitations have to happen in your mind. Your brain, not mind. The brain has to think a lot and understand how famine reshape, how cinematic representations of famine reshape public opinion. It is not about studying the data, it is studying about the consciousness of the people, about the records which you consider as sacrosanct records. So that is actually a higher form of interdisciplinary, starting with, you have to ask these questions at the very first instance of confronting a problem. Because the research problem well laid out is the beginning of a good research, isn't it? Right. A research problem leads to a good title, a research problem leads to a good methodology, a problem leads to a good method, invocation of methods, finally a good narrative also. If the research problem derails, then the total thesis is derailed. And you can expect the RIP status and rest in peace in a library. Now the second thing, these are the pathways to interdisciplinarity, as I understand, is develop theoretical flexibility. Don't think that everything can be substantiated and argued within the contours of Marxian theory. Marxian theory is excellent, okay, well and good. I use that. Suppose someone says that, you use this, you have to go through this, No. Flexibility of theoretical understanding is very important. For example, you can draw from many theories like Barth in the case of, because why I quote Barth very much is that, I have seen him as a fantastic person. The body of Barth became, as I said, an interdisciplinary text. Whenever we read Barth, we get to understand the rustle of interdisciplinarity. The rustle of language, I think all postgraduate students should read this rustle of interdisciplinarity, RUSTLE of interdisciplinarity by, rustle of language. Rustle of language, I'm sorry for that. Rustle of language by Roland Barthes. Now you can go to Thomas Kuhn for understanding certain conceptual apparatuses to frame the world, theoretical flexibility of Kuhn. Thomas Kuhn. Who was Kuhn? Thomas Kuhn, who was the celebrated author of The Structure of Scientific Revolution, a scientist who was walking through the veranda of MIT, one of the most esteemed institutions in Massachusetts Institute of Technology, He happened to hear a lecture on French Revolution by a professor, and the professor was saying it was a wonderful lecture. He stood there for some time and listened to him, and he listened, what are the causes of French Revolution? Because we happen to study, all of you have studied French Revolution, Perhaps you have 12 courses, I have 13 courses. I get A plus, you get A, right? So that was the difference in French Revolution courses. But this professor was saying that French Revolution happened because not because of ideas, it is not because of circumstances, but because of geographical phenomena, which is called the El Nino. That was a fascinating, insightful reference for Thomas Kuhn. And what Thomas Kuhn did, you see, MIT was a very liberal organization, very flexible space, not like Kerala University, the MG University, who asked for migration, matriculation, all forms like that. Whenever you go to them, the first thing they ask is, no, not your competency of knowledge, do you have a migration certificate to migrate to this university? This happened in an equivalency certificate. Compulsorily, you have to get that, Otherwise, you will be served a disciplinary or not even a university sent a memo, MEMO. I was shocked to I got a memo from the university after getting rank from MG University. I went to Kerala University with much pride. I got a rank from MG University, and then I went to Kerala University, and they're asking not about my mark or percentage, where is the migration certificate? It will take some time, sir. I was not knowing, I was a matriculate in the university. Only recently, when I went to write an article on higher education in Madhyamam, I came to understand that the matriculation is a very important, meaningful, definition allowed to enter a university. നിങ്ങൾ ആരാണ് നിങ്ങളെ ഇങ്ങോട്ട് എൻ്റർ ചെയ്യുന്നത്? ചുമ്മാ എല്ലാവർക്കും ചെന്ന് കയറാൻ പറ്റുന്ന സ്ഥലമല്ലേ സർവകലാശാല എന്ന് പറയും. ഇപ്പൊ അങ്ങനെയാണെങ്കിൽ so this kind of a theoretical flexibility was there, institutional flexibility there was there with Massachusetts Institute of Technology, that Thomas Kuhn went to the office and registered himself as a student for a course in history with that professor. That led to his writing Structure of Scientific Revolution. That led to the conceptualization of one of the finest framework for understanding something like Foucaultian episteme paradigm. Paradigm. We can use this term because thanks to the professor who delivered the lecture on French Revolution. If you go to the root cause of paradigm, right? Then, of course, from Barthes to semiotics to Saussurean semiotics, Kuhn in science studies, Foucault in history, most violent and terrorizing historian. Violent in the sense that he used all these words, just trash these words. For example, archaeology, he said that not just excavating the earth, but excavating ideas. You should excavating ideas. Possibilities is the condition of knowledge making. That is archaeology. You're redefining, terms and concepts within a paradigm, within episteme, as Foucault said, a mental apparatus with which Foucault was leading was a positivist world. Only in 1960s, students understand about the revolts in 1960s, the protest in the Parisian streets that led to the invigoration of the mind of Foucault when he pelted stones at the best, along with the students. That is academics. So everything, every act is something which is reflexive. That was reflected in Foucault's history that dissented with the positivist and conventionalist today. Develop theoretical flexibility. Don't say that, I will work only with postmodern theory. I will not look at modern. Is there a postmodern without a modern? If you ask him, that's not a question. So this methodological rigor, rigorous methodological invocation, flexible, at the same time, another important, the third step to interdisciplinary understanding is multilingual academic vocabulary. നമുക്ക് ഭാഷയുടെ ഉപയോഗം വളരെ പ്രധാനമാണ് സോഷ്യൽ സയൻസ്. നമ്മുടെ ഭാഷ എന്ന് പറയുന്നത് വളരെ പ്രധാനപ്പെട്ട ഒരു സാധനം. നമ്മുടെ ബോധം ഭാഷയിലൂടെയല്ലേ വരുന്നത്. ഭാഷയിലേക്ക് ബോധമില്ല. എനിക്ക് വേദനിക്കുന്നു എന്ന് പറഞ്ഞാലല്ലേ എൻ്റെ വേദന നിങ്ങൾക്ക് മനസ്സിലാകും, അല്ലേ? അല്ല ഞാനിവിടെ ഞെക്കി പിടിച്ചോണ്ടിരിക്കുകയാണെങ്കിൽ നിങ്ങൾക്കത് മനസ്സിലാവണം. അപ്പം വേദനിക്കുന്നു എന്ന് പറയുന്ന ഒരു റെറ്ററിക് ഉണ്ട്, ഒരു സാധനമുണ്ട്. അത് വേദനിക്കുന്നു എന്ന് പറയുന്നതിന് പകരം നിങ്ങൾക്ക് വേറെ പല ഭാഷയും പറയാം. എനിക്ക് അറ്റാക്ക് തോന്നുന്നു, അല്ലെങ്കിൽ എനിക്ക് ഇങ്ങനെ തോന്നുന്നു, എനിക്ക് ഈ ഫീലിംഗ് ഉണ്ട്. അപ്പം ഒരു ആളെ എങ്ങനെയാണ് നറേറ്റ് ചെയ്യുന്നത്, ലേൺ ടു സ്പീക്ക് in an idiom, not in a structured or unstructured manner, in an idiom that will communicate with your audience, the readers. So that's why it is said that multilingual academic vocabulary is very important, because vocabulary always, is projected something like, it's not like the vocabulary of a person who knows all the words in the dictionary. Some people they have fantastic vocabulary, but no content with them, that is not there. Vocabulary that is very much getting adapted to the elaboration of a theme. Vocabulary, the correct conceptual classification, terms and terminologies that we use in theory, in theoretical invocations is very important. That you can develop only through reading books, again reading articles. Reading is very important. Reflexive reading is very important in that sense. Finally, you engage in methodological pluralism That is why I said methodological pluralism and reflexive critiquing of the discipline itself. Reflexive critiquing of the discipline itself. Only then an open way is there for you to go ahead in the pathway of interdisciplinarity. So there are many pathways to interdisciplinarity. Interdisciplinarity, don't consider interdisciplinarity as a mainstream. Sometimes interdisciplinarity can be a substream also. Don't think that interdisciplinarity is going to encompass everything. It can be a strong substream, which is better than the mainstream. So don't think that interdisciplinarity is going to provide you, take you into the, or land you into mainstream. It's not like that. It's a substream, but very strong. It contains all the vital elements of nature, vital elements of humanity itself. For instance, sometimes it can be considered as, what do you call a truly human being acclimatizing with different complex systems, as if living in a forest ecosystem. So now, hello, can you, two the pictures are there. Actually, I thought of, when he adjusts this technology, you have to read one book, that is Interdisciplinarity, History, Theory and Practice, written by Julie Thompson Klein, Klein, number 1. And then it's, it's a classic text on interdisciplinarity, because, a reference I am giving you. Hello students, please read Julie Thompson Klein, Klein. She wrote Interdisciplinarity, History, Theory and Practice, just published in 1990. You should start reading that. The best way to open up an understanding of interdisciplinarity. Another fascinating work is interdisciplinary. The title of work itself is very interesting. Interdisciplinary birth. The person himself became interdisciplinary. That is edited by. That's an edited by Diana Knight. Only when I read several of the articles in Diana Knight's interdisciplinary birth, I came to understand that a discipline becoming a human being. I recently did an archaeological excavation of this advertisement of Britannia glucose biscuit. There was a Parle-G biscuit at this time. They were prime #1 sellers of biscuit. Now with Gabbar Singh Ji came glucose D, because Britannia said, we need to reframe glucose and add one more vitamin D. Okay, right? Then they were about to release this advertisement, and at that point of time, certain discussions happened within them, a kind of interdisciplinary thinking. They thought that, the best icon that has, captured the minds of even children, not Amitabh Bachchan or Dharmendra, but it is Anthropocene, Gabbar Singh. So they said, Gabbar ki asli pasand, there is a dialogue which he is conversing with that person, Kalia, Kalia, only one dialogue in that film, only one dialogue for that man is acting in that film, Kalia. I forgot the name of the actor. But anyway, Gabbar Singh ki asli pasand. What happened is that the advertisement led to Britannia becoming #1 biscuit sellers in India. It can be read from different standpoint. One from a film historical standpoint, film studies standpoint. For example, historiography, that how this photograph, narrates a politics of, dietary practice or taste making, something like a Bourdieu's distinction, how they make the taste of the villain becoming a champion for a children's biscuit, and at the same time, the Gabbar Singh totally changing. So this text and image changed the entire perceptual modality about the villain. Villain started defining the taste of biscuit in India. So it can be looked through the Barthian or Saussurean semiotics. It can be looked through a political, a nationalistic kind of thing. I think Dr. Biju is an expert in that, because you look at Gabbar Singh, he belonged to Chambal. When I read about Chambal, I understood that Chambal was offering a different kind of nationalism, a forced nationalism, against the development of nationalism of the state. That is actually concealed in Shori. That is a kind of a villainous nationalism, which was dubbed as, anti-national in that sense. But he became a national hero. So the image, actually, the visibility in the image itself is a trap. You are trapped inside that. But the thing is that the person, the Champal's hero, Gabbar Singh Gujjar, the actual character, historical figure, became the champion of the cinema. So this is actually a case of multiple readings. You use the archaeological methodology of Foucault. How, at a particular point of time, conditions of the possibility of knowledge making. ബിസ്ക്കറ്റ് കഴിക്കുന്ന ഇഷ്ടത്തെ ഉണ്ടാക്കിയെടുക്കുന്ന ഒരു ജ്ഞാനവ്യവസ്ഥയെ ആരുണ്ടാക്കിയെടുത്തു? ബ്രിട്ടാനിയ ഉണ്ടാക്കിയെടുത്തു. റൈറ്റ്? Second comes Marlboro. You can see that this is a usual photograph that emerges with a cowboy style Marlboro, the hero, the heroic version of an individual. Without Marlboro, he is not a hero, but a zero. That's what Marlboro said. Next. And this is actually not that. Actually, can you go to a slide of Marlboro again? The last one, the last one. This is Mild as May. In the 1960s, Marlboro started, introducing new cigarettes for ladies. Mild as May. May is a flower, Mayflower, very tender flower, So you can definitely smoke, no issue with that. It's mild. But for the other fellow with the horse, it is the wild, right? So differentiation between that. So structurally, semiotically, if you use structural linguistic methods, the political aspiration of a Marlboro company is very visible in that. So document narrates more history than the text in this sense. I think Kerala historians should definitely be encouraged. Kerala historians should be encouraged to come up with images. Only images to understand the colonialism, images to understand the plantation culture, images to understand the Muna. So lot of studies can be done on that ground. Second, can you go back? Again, one more. See, this was actually when I was reading Hindu newspaper in Biju's house today. I came across an advertisement. And next, see, the future of health is on your wrist. Oh, what a wonderful, way of prompting you to buy this watch, because the future is on your wrist. So sensibly, you are attaching to the particular instrument. The same Hindu in 2020 during the pandemic time came out with an ad which was about a sanitizer, Bacto-B, B-A-C-T-O, Bacto-B. While I went through I thought that, this is good sanitizer. This is not for human. This is for the gadget, the telephone, and your MacBook. Everything needs a sanitizer. It is better than the sanitizers used by the humans. So the machine became more important for the sanitizer company, projecting the body, the sensibilities of the body. You become a gadget, you will get the sanitizer. If you are a human, you will not get that. That is why in that time, I was actually engaging with the new concept, which is a humanization of the gadget. And we become gadgetized in some sense, because the gadgets are more humanized and we become gadgetized. One more photo was. And this is featuring, and then the future of health is on your list. So look at the way in which the company is advertising watch as that is a concept or companion connected to your health. That is right. Semiotically, you can read it in very different manner. Apple, they have not added something like an apple a day keeps the doctor away. It's not like that. The conventional structured text is not there, because your health is safeguarded in the watch. ഞങ്ങളുടെ കയ്യിൽ നിങ്ങളുടെ ഹൃദയം സുരക്ഷിതമാണ്. അഡ്വർടൈസ്മെന്റ് കാണുന്ന അഡ്വർടൈസ്മെന്റ് ചെയ്ത് ആ സുരക്ഷിത ഓർത്താണ് നമ്മൾ അങ്ങോട്ട് പോകുന്നതാണ് അതിന്റെ അർത്ഥം. നിങ്ങൾ വരൂ, നിങ്ങളുടെ ഹൃദയം ഇവിടെ സുരക്ഷിതമാണ്. അല്ലെങ്കിൽ ചില പരസ്യങ്ങളെ നമ്മൾ കാണാറില്ലേ, 25 വർഷത്തെ പാരമ്പര്യം എന്ന് പറയും. നിങ്ങൾ കാഞ്ഞിര പിടിക്കാത്ത അച്ചായന്റെ ടേം തന്നെ വെച്ചിട്ട് ഒരു പരസ്യം സ്വർണ്ണമായിട്ട് വരുന്നു. അച്ചായന്റെ സ്വർണം, കയ്യിൽ നിന്ന് സ്വർണ്ണം എല്ലാം കളഞ്ഞു കുടിച്ച ഒരു അച്ചായന്മാര് വേറെ ഉണ്ടെന്നുള്ളതാണ് അതിൽ വേറെ ചരിത്രം. ഈ അച്ചായൻ സ്വർണം മേടിക്കുന്നു, മറ്റച്ചായന്മാരുടെ സ്വർണം മൊത്തം പോകും. So the way in which an advertisement leads you to provoke an imagination is very important. And now, this is over. So my final take on the whole issue is that As I said, interdisciplinarity is actually a conditioning of the frame of mind of the researcher. A conditioning of the frame of mind of the researcher to look out to get exposed to get connected to make new linkages, to make new networks, like the rainforest, not the salad bowl. Thank you.